Siani. We are joined by Koki Ochieng and Mark Bichachi to review the dailies, and later on also just look at the weekend review. So we start off as usual. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes, karibuni sana. And we start as usual with the headlines on the Standard, where we have the power of the baton, the father. And this, of course, is talking about this particular baton that was passed to the senator for Baringo County, Gideon Moi, as his father was laid to rest. But of course, the bigger picture here is it looks like this seems to be something that happens within families where you have the father if he's president, you have one of the sons who seems to take over from the father. Let me start with you, David Osiani, on the power of the baton, just looking at it. And of course, weighing in on what Raila had to say. He seemed to make a very strong point there. And depending on which side you look at it from, you'll agree or disagree, where he was saying that, for instance, Gideon Moi, as a Kenyan, has every right, like any other Kenyan, to vie for whatever seat he would like.
Thank you very much, Mike. Now, Raila was trying to strip this whole nonsense around dynasties. And I want to help him like I have done before. When you look at Chandaria Manu, because he was a businessman, his children, having been raised in that environment, most, if not all, have turned into businessmen, in fact, running the father's empire. Today, his grandson, who's 34, Darshan, has taken over from the father. Billy Graham was a great preacher. An evangelist, and you know his son has taken after him. Why? That's the environment he grew up in. My mother was a distinguished nurse. My sister, who follows me, thought that what mommy used to do was so nice. She is a nurse. This cannot be different for the political class, and so we do not need to bedevil children of politicians who take after their parents, because that's the environment they have grown up in. Children of Masons sometimes just become Masons because they say, this is what daddy used to do. I remember one of the presenters who used to be here was also a pathologist, because that's what daddy used to do. So it is unfair to try and say that because you're the child of a politician, then you becoming a politician is a problem, that you can't have a mind of your own. Sometimes, I was reading the story of the 5 Nigerian sisters who are all doctors, who are daughters of 2 doctors. Professor Magoha is a professor of medicine. His only son is a doctor. Why? Because he grew up in an environment that inspired that dream in him. So I looked at Gideon being handed the baton by Raymond, which I thought was a very gracious move. In fact, Raymond is a hero. It's very hard to find an older brother who says that in this area, my kid brother, you're the talented one. Those of us who read the Bible know how it went with Joseph, because the brothers were not going to take it, saying, Chief, you can't be bigger than us. And Raymond graciously said, you know what? When it gets to politics, you will go ahead of us. Pretty much what the Kenyattas have done. What Oburu did with Raila Odinga. Said, you're the younger one, but I think this has been yours.
Whereas that is true and what you say is accurate, the question then remains, how do others get an opportunity or a chance for that? Because then what that means, it already gives a disadvantage to anybody else unless you come with a name. And I'll give you case in point before you shake your head. Case in point is somebody like Uhuru Kenyatta. At the point where Moi picked Kenyatta to become, sort of heir of KANU. Kenyatta had no political clout other than his name, his father's name. But that gave him an advantage by virtue of the fact that people knew this is a former president's son. But in terms of anything he had done politically, he did not have. If somebody else had been picked and say, you know, it was just somebody else, then things may not
Did
have
he
played
win?
out.
Did he win the election? Did
He did not
Kenyatta
win the elections,
Good.
but today he is the president of Kenya because of that platform that he was given. Who else would have been given that platform?
I do not.
I'll let the lady go first.
Yes, yes.
Then
When
I'll
I heard
hammer you later.
Ostiani say his mom was a nurse, I thought he said
You're going to say he's a nurse as well.
Okay. My view is exactly what he's saying. I mean, let's look at it critically. If that has been modeled all your life, and that's what you've seen you've grown into, then it suffices. It's not fair if you castigate them for having that
The
opportunity.
issue is not to castigate them, but it's to be honest enough to say that there is indeed an unlevel playing field.
Yes, but there is indeed
They have an
unlevel.
advantage.
They
The
have an
starting point is not the
advantage,
same.
just that they don't have to really start their own careers. But that doesn't mean that you can't catch up anywhere along the way. So for me, I think it's more of, okay, who takes the mantle from the father, which happens even without being in that particular environment. Now, the argument of the dynasties, of course, remains because these are children from a more privileged background and therefore get more privilege, which is almost always the context. But that doesn't mean that there are not others who can start from elsewhere and still get to where they're going.
Okay, just like Kenyatta himself started and...
just like the Bush sons, you know, he running against Obama. Jeb was just, I mean, the Bush sons have been in the contest. Jeb lost to Donald Trump, okay? Obama came from nowhere in a system that one would argue had the big names in the Democratic Party, the Kennedys, who had been there for years, names that one would know, Hillary Clinton, who was a first lady, and Obama just gave the good girl a proper route. And so there are times when talent will override these privileges. It is not enough to have the advantage of the name. You must then build up on that container with the content. The container may be good, it has the name, but if the content is zero, woe unto you.
All right, let's hear from Mark.
You know, I am getting so tired of lazy thinking in this country. Let us consider how many vice presidents have been there in this country since inception.
Yeah, there have been many, but have they been able to catch their niche?
No, you'd imagine that there was one. Because if we're going to talk about dynasties, then we will say that if Raila is a dynasty by virtue of his father, not by his own right, okay, that he's a politician because he's Raila Odinga, and not because he's Jaramogi's son, then we have to argue that Kibaki's son is also a dynasty. But where is Kibaki's son in the political field? You have to argue that Mudi Awori's son should also be a dynasty. Number two, we act as though 2022 is a coronation. People will vote. Now, how is it the fault of Gideon or Raila or anybody else that you queued and voted for them?
And the thing is,
Thirdly, on the nonsense of advantage, life is not an equal playing field. If I today went to vie anywhere in this country, I have an advantage of being on this set. I have facial recognition.
And that's the honesty that we're looking for, that yes, there is an advantage. The thing is, sometimes you'll have politicians make it sound that like there's no advantage, it's a level playing field. It is not level. But we're not starting all at the same point.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. The biggest problem, listen, if you are broke at home, jobless, not paid enough money, understand this, and let me teach you terminology. There is a difference between dynastic rule and elite rule. Now let's be clear. In this country, unless you're elite, you're not becoming president. And that elitism is brought to the fore by the fact that the person shouting, "I'm broke, I'm a hustler" most at home is also the person who wants to be given money by the person who's running. So the person who's MP is most likely elite. The person who's governor is most likely elite. And that elite class does not recognize. When you go to Nairobi Club or the Royal Club, do you go there by virtue of money or by virtue of your father's name? Let me ask, which Kenyan politician, which top rank politician is not elite in this country? Which one of them is not rich? Which one of them is their children going to struggle 5 years from now? Is Uhuru's child going to struggle when Uhuru leaves power? Is Raila's child going to struggle? Is Ruto's child going to struggle? Let's be very clear. Let us not say that when we compare these people, that the one who has a father with a big name has a bigger advantage than the one who has deep pockets. Let's be clear. Which one of them is broke to say, listen, I am so broke, I need the Kenyan people to contribute for me, like Barack Obama did. Then you can start telling me about rags to riches. You can tell me, listen, I raised $1 at a time. But you can't be filthy wealthy and then complaining about fellow elite just because you got your wealth differently from theirs. You understand? And most likely just corruption in different decades.
All right, and I want us to look at other stories on the headlines. But this is definitely a conversation, especially politically speaking, that is going to carry on. And the reason why I wanted us to also just banter on this a little bit is because politicians are going to use this to their advantage. They're going to twist and turn the question or the narrative of dynasties versus no dynasties. There is a point that was made by the former Prime Minister, and one must, as a Kenyan, agree that all Kenyans are equal and are allowed.
Let me just say.
No, they have a right. We
They have a
agree.
right.
They have a right. But what this analogy is about is that, okay, you are placed in a certain level due to exposure, and therefore you will chart your way easier through leadership. But that doesn't mean that you cannot be a leader from wherever you are. There is the Form 4 gentleman who's now an MP. He started from, his story or his narrative is that he went door to door, knocked and got the positions. And we've had so many such cases. But that doesn't mean that because they are from that background, then they need to be alienated. I think that it is, yes, they have an advantage, but that doesn't stop me or you to becoming somebody.
Okay, Mike, each of these things, regardless of what we look at as the comparative advantage, there is an extreme level of effort. If these were dynasties who are, this is thrust upon them when they didn't like, then how would you explain Gideon Moi losing the first election he ran for? How will you explain Raymond Moi losing an election? How will you explain that Uhuru Kenyatta lost an election in Gatundu? How? If they are dynasties and this is an advantage, then they cannot even fathom losing an election. It means there is effort. You lost, came back, went and fought hard, tried to make amends, found that saying Baringo Yaketi wasn't working, learned Kalenjin, came back. The people of Baringo appreciated you, embraced you, you won an election. You lost, graciously accepted defeat, went back to Gatundu South, mingled with those people down there. They understood your perspective. They felt that now you're mature enough to be one of us. The struggles of these kids, of the rulers, in terms of electoral, stature, has been pretty much the same as the struggle of all these other people. They may have been born in homes where there was abundance, but that did not guarantee that they would ascend.
Give me 2 minutes.
I want us to look at other stories, because I can see this can literally be the only story we're going. 30 seconds, and I'm timing.
Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was vice president for 5 years in 1963 to 68. You move that down to 1992. Raila Odinga did not have to be his son to be in prison for those years. Raila Odinga in 1992, in the pecking order of Ford Kenya, he was nothing. He had to go and look to form his own party and begin the Tinga party to be who he was.
Point made.
Why do we wake up and decide now he's a dynasty?
Point made.
Mike is very disappointed with this.
Not necessarily disappointed, but the thing is, I know this conversation is going to go on, and unfortunately,
it has been going
politicians are going to take this and literally milk it and take advantage.
So will we disadvantage the son of William Ruto, Luke, who he wanted to make run in Rongai, as MP, when Luke decides that he is man enough to run, will we tell him, your dynasty, you cannot run? It will be unfair to the son of Ruto,
Absolutely.
just as it is unfair to the son of
Let us
Odinga,
look at other
unfair to the
stories.
son of Moi, and unfair to the son of
Let us look
Kenyatta.
at other stories now. And on the top page of the Standard, we also have former CS Echesa arrested in 39 billion gun fraud probe. This is hardly 9 months after he had been arrested again before. And of course, this is as investigations carry on. Mark, your thoughts on this? And of course, the war on corruption is still going on.
You see, first, this is not corruption. This is conmanship. Let's just be very clear. If I did the same thing, you would splash on the page Mark Bichachi found to be a conman. So let's not sugarcoat it. It's not corruption. This guy created, okay, it is alleged, so that I'm not sued. It is alleged that he created a fake tender, brought in 2 investors, told them just to talk to me, you need to pay $115,000 US to talk to me. And then eventually they were supposed to pay a whooping 50-something million shillings for them to get the tender. Now, that is number 1, conmanship. It is number 2, an abuse of the privilege of being a leader in this country, which we need to call them out to. Positions in this country are not supposed to be used as opportunities and avenues for personal gain. It is not normal. It should not be accepted. It is the worst thing any leader can do, because let us remember, it is leaders who are representative of the majority. So you can imagine what the people in those other countries are saying about us. No wonder when you apply for a visa, you need to give them your bank statement, your marriage certificate, your ID number, PIN number, KRA, simply because of such acts. And let's not forget that soon after he was arrested, he starts saying it's political. Now I wonder how many votes those Mzungus that were conned have in this country. How is it political?
All right. Koki?
No, I just think it's the crack of the whip. Somebody somewhere is really looking into what is not going right. It might not be obvious, but there's somebody somewhere who is keen, even if it's touching on personalities we never thought it would touch on, is very keen to make sure that things are done in order. Because when I read the story, I just saw it's like a mishap of the tendering process. And corruption is two-way. You can't argue that it's just him. It's two-way. So what about these people who are doing tenders? Why is it that they find themselves in those situations?
In those situations.
Yeah, why can't they just go through processes? So I think it's just a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know whether they'll be prosecuted, but we just know that we get aware every other day of what is the face of corruption. And that's what I
And
like.
what it looks like. David
Yes.
Osiani, your thoughts on this? And of course, Kenya seems to be gaining ground. There are times those would have been so-called untouchables by virtue of the fact of their position, but that seems to have changed in Kenya now.
I think Rashid was the wrong example of youthful or young leadership.
Most of them have been wrong examples.
I know, it is sad. They
Very
spoil for
disappointing.
us who will be great examples. Now, to have entrusted Rashid with the role of a cabinet secretary, my friend, whoever did it, I don't know what he wanted to achieve. Was he specially skilled? Was he gifted? Was he talented? Was he charismatic? Was he capable? The answers to each of those questions
Is no.
Is no, with the red, bold, underlined, and if you like, italicized, just to make it emphatic. I am not shocked that this is it. Rashid ni msee wa tao. Msee wa town. Kwa ground, my friend. So this is a very bad example of what a youthful leadership should be for this country. When we have thousands of young people, excellent humans, who would be great examples, who would make us all proud, you know, to be called young people. People, you know, I heard Musalia saying at the funeral that he was made the Minister for Finance at 33. Tom Mboya was Minister for Economic Planning at 33. David Musila was Provincial Commissioner in this country at 29. But if Achesas of this world are going to take these positions and behave like this, how are the Maccabee churches going to come and say, we are young people, we can transform this country?
Mike,
You
we
know,
need
and the
to ask
cookies
the
and the David Oceans.
Me, I'm not a youth. Well, I'm not a youth.
No, young nowadays, you know, the UN has decided young is below 65.
Oh,
But
okay.
we stick to the original 35 or below 40 as young leadership. So
Yeah.
I just hope that we are able to punish what is wrong. Whatever is wrong in this country must be seen to be viciously punished so that no one does it again. You see, the war on corruption by the new dynamic duo or triplets, whatever you call them, Nordin, Kinoti, and now Twalib, the fight against graft, you reckon, has created a lot of deterrence. You walk in the government ministries where people would just walk in tenders and just say, tunangoja kadil around the corner. That's no longer there because they almost think, hey, my friend, I'm going to be arrested and thrown in. But the moment we nail and punish ills, if it is proven, let me also be safe, as Mark said, if this is proven to have been true, then there has to be a vicious punishment for it. So that subsequently, no one can use their officers to con others. Because when you say you're a cabinet secretary, and I check and confirm that you're a CS, and you're promising me this deal, I mean, you sit at cabinet. You sit with the president weekly.
You're likely to be privileged and have influence.
Exactly.
Yes, Koki.
But the fundamental question is, why would I, as somebody looking for business, find myself in that situation where I need to negotiate with the wrong persons? There are procedures. There are structures in which you do tenders. There are ways you should do them. Why is it that it is felt that, okay, I know it's a business, tenderpreneur and all that, but bottom line, you can't say it's only one person who tangles in this. You have to look at the system holistically. And then the other question, and the youth are here to answer, is why them? Given the opportunities that they've been given in the Constitution, what is the challenge of getting those you guys in to do something that is honorable? Because I think for me it would be an advantage if younger people were more virtuous than the older ones, or demonstrated something different.
The problem in this country, just to answer you, Koki, is two things. Number one, many young people have no stories of people who are rich in this country without corruption and without politics. The marriage of corruption and wealth and politics in this country is the problem. When you ask a young person who is a rich Nairobian, they'll tell you Sonko. And if not Sonko, they'll tell you Babu Owino. That's the unfortunate narrative that a lot of young people have grown up with. Secondly, there has been for a long time no incentive for being good. It always seems that the worst of us are rewarded. So you behave like Sonko, you become governor. You behave like Babu Owino, you become MP. You behave like Jaguar, you become MP. And so that's the narrative that's been there. Now put that on top of the reality that a lot of young people have not been told about industry. They've not been told about entrepreneurship. And a lot of young people still believe in getting jobs. Because how many people do you see that, oh my goodness, I have a master's, I'm almost getting a PhD, but I've been unemployed for 20 years. Now you can imagine, the person who quit school at class 6 is looking for a job. Quit school at class 8 looking for a job. Form 4 leaver looking for a job. Degree holder looking for a job. Masters looking for a job. PhD looking for a job. So you can imagine how young people now begin to look at not leadership, because that's not leadership. They look at being an MP, being a politician, as an avenue to making money. And I'll tell you what one politician told me to my face. He told me, Mark, if you want to be an MP, look for some money so that you can bribe voters, win, and then look so that when you become MP, you can get your money back with interest. That's really why young people.
It's tragic.
Yeah, that's the truth.
But maybe then the bigger question we should be asking is our value system.
Yes,
because
exactly.
then there's a problem there.
Yeah.
And regardless, then it's not an issue of whether we put the young or the old.
Yes.
Our value system is completely
and we should
gone off.
ask ourselves, really, when did the rain start hitting us?
And how do we get back on track?
Okay, we can say that maybe in our age or our time, corruption wasn't visible. you associated leadership with certain values and systems. But now as time goes on, we are also exposed to, okay, this story about corruption, this, and we find out what it is. But at the end of the day, I think there should be movement of young people who alter the narrative.
Mike, I think, let me say, we long lost the communal sense of upbringing, of imparting values in our children. We have to go back to the floors of our houses and address the value system of this country. Like Obama said, I could run, become president, fix the nation, but I'll not come home, switch off the TV so that your child can read. We have to go back to the floors of our houses and sit down and impart the correct values in our children. It is not fixed by the parent who thinks that for my child to get into the police, let me bribe the commissioner, county commissioner, or whoever it is, so that when they come to interview, my child will get the chance. It is not fixed by the mother who thinks they love their children so much they are willing to buy exams for them. It is not going to be fixed by the church that takes God for a joke and has commercialized God and is as corrupt, if not worse, than the political class. It is time we had a very honest deliberation and discussion around our value system, because it is perpetuated by the church, a church that can no longer ask. When you are obviously giving, and we thank the Lord, abundantly, and it doesn't seem to us as clear where you get your money, and we are asking, okay, if Mwangi came to give as much, we would know that he's grown from this coin to these billions. But if you are unable to tell the story, the church that cannot repudiate its membership and say, no, we have to be accountable to God and to man, that's not there. Where are the Alexander Muges? Where are the Bishop Okulus? Where are the Ndingi Mwana Nzekis who would stand firm for what is right? Where are the parents of old who would stop any child randomly, feeling the sense of ownership, and tell a child, tuck in, you look unkempt? Where are those parents of the days of yore who would stop and tell any child talking, in unpalatable language and say, that's not what you say? Recently, 2 weeks ago, I remember driving around town, and there were these kids, one dressed very skimpily, but I could see a young boy. They're very young, teens. And the boy is busy, holding the child, not the girl child, as though to harass her sexually. And I saw cars literally pass. I could see them from a distance, and all cars just drove by as if nothing was happening. I stopped, got out of the car, held the young man by my hand and said, you have to be disciplined. What are you doing to this young girl? And who teaches you to behave like this? And there were about 7 of them. And they were shocked and gutted. And you could see they just shrunk. If each of us took the responsibility of our children in our own hands and did not have to wait for somebody else to do it but us, we would start improving the narrative of our value system. Until and unless that is done, we have a long way to go and a short time to get there.
All right, before we wind up, there's a story here on page 3 of The Nation. And today, of course, just in case somebody is looking for an excuse, it is the 14th of February. And I see none of you are
not going to the
in the uniform. I don't know if the men's conference is taking off after this.
I'm updating you that there's a women's conference.
There's a women's conference coming up. So, shocking facts. Your co-wife could be hubby's workmate. And of course, this is what we're talking about here, the value system. Yeah. And even when it comes to a day like this, Valentine's Day, of course, we perceive it differently. But Mark, I don't know if it's a day that you choose to, just go on with life as usual, or is it a day that maybe you just like to appreciate those around you that you love, and specifically your wife?
Let's start here. I do not celebrate Christmas, neither do I celebrate Valentine's Day. Simply because I do
Mark,
not...
it's a day where you just take to choose and, celebrate the person that you love.
It's a day where chocolate companies and flower sellers make money. Let's stop commercializing that.
You're right, bro.
If your wife can't feel loved,
This is cheap talk.
That's coming from a
This is
dude.
no. I'm not accepting it. I'm not taking it. Let me tell you something.
Koki, unless I've married you, you have no right to complain about that.
No. We're not going to talk about it that way.
No, but it's my time. I was asked my opinion. Can I give my opinion?
Okay.
If 364 days in a year, my wife cannot feel loved by me, nothing's going to change on Valentine's Day. It is not about a red flower, and I don't know who told people love is red. It is about creating genuine and authentic connections with those in your life so that for them it is Valentine's Day. Let me tell you, my children have no expectation of gifts on their birthdays because they know their father will bring them gifts for no reason at whatever time, whenever I feel like. The reason for that is very simple. The psychology of domiciling emotions and feelings into a particular day is part of the reason this country is a bit flawed. Look at it this way. Kenyans will spend their last coin and borrow on the 25th. On the 2nd, they're crying January. How is that logical to you? How does that make sense to you?
Okay, because of time, I want to hear from Koki. You've already made your point, Koki.
Okay, for me, it's kind of sentimental. You know, I'm a widow, so my husband, the last Valentine, told me, "Love is all you have, be and love is all you have, be and do." So for me, it has that implication. And one thing he always did is on random days also to send me flowers. When we were younger, send me flowers to work and chocolate. And he knew that's what I liked. But yeah, so for me, it's really sentimental. And he died like 3 days after. So for me, it's sentimental in that manner. And for me, it's not commercial because it's just a day to celebrate, maybe something that you shared and, you know, always remember it. But he's right. Every day, and he used to say, every day should be Christmas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I appreciate
You
it.
appreciate that.
Now that he's gone, at least I
Okay, David.
that. Yeah.
I know my wife Siombua has given me express permission, and so Koki tonight is going to have dinner at a place of her choice, courtesy of me.
Oh, thank you.
Valentine is happening right here.
No, because I think we do not understand the true struggles of widows sometimes, and whereas she lives her life with such a beautiful aplomb, and one wouldn't tell until she mentions, I think if it is of that sentimental value, then I'm going to ask her to just point out where she wants to go with one other person. I will pay for it, because that's the spirit of this day. I do not celebrate, you know, both Valentine and Christmas are not anchored on anything apart from, as Mark said, it's business, and it's days created for whatever it is. As a Christian, you know, I find neither in the Bible. But because of the value attached to it, and especially by the women folk, I know my wife will probably be expecting something. You know, at her workplace, they know that if there's someone who is treated as random chocolates and flowers, she too loves, extremely randomly. Sometimes she has to say, honey, it's become too much. But if for this day, that's the value they attach to it, you also don't want to disappoint, because you don't want her to feel off. She knows all the other days when the world is not celebrating, she's feeling all sweet and nice. But on this day, she also doesn't want to feel like, so Leo, sasa, the whole world now, you know. But as Mark rightly says it, each and every single day for any people in relationships should be as valuable. Your partner must feel as loved and cherished. Your partner must feel appreciated and, most importantly, respected. It's the key to all these things.
I think that would be a great place to just wind this up right now.
Very important.
But you're still
Happy Valentine's to the celebrants, especially the women folk.
All right,
it takes two to tango.
We need to pay some bills. Otherwise, some of us will not get our salary at the end of the month. Therefore, we'll not be able to take our loved ones for those chocolated flowers. So we're taking a break, but do stay with us. When we come back, it's time for us to review what has been happening over the week. This is Morning Express. Do stay with us.